Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News. What's going on, Gail?
Hey, good evening, everybody. We're in the mood to talk about boxing. It's a good thing because we got a show to do.
Right. So for those who may not be watching football or baseball or whatever, uh, please enjoy us talk about a bit of the sweet science. We were off last week to observe, because last week the day we was going to do the show was going to be on Labor Day. We weren't going to do a show on Labor Day, so decided to wait 2 weeks, and we're back right now live. Uh, Hope to have Daniel from the Inscriber, our regular host. Hope to have him join the show later on. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. For the time being, to get all the information regarding the show, the blog page is the place to go to. P4P P4pboxreport.wordpress.com. If you're watching now live on YouTube, just hit the description below. You'll find links to where to find us all over, where to find the blog page, where to find us all over social media, where you can find us on all RSS feed carriers for podcasts, where you can donate. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. And last but certainly not least, my link to my online coaching page. I am an online coach for beachbody.com. For those who are interested in getting their health together, getting their fitness game up, or checking out some new, want to challenge themselves in terms of their fitness, please check out my coaching page on Pound for Pound Box Report blog page. 2 week trials that run throughout the year. Doing a challenge group myself, featuring the one of the new programs on Beachbody on Demand. 6 weeks of the work. So if you want to really step your game up, if you really want to challenge yourself fitness wise, the my challenge group is happening right now. It's going to go through October. And if you're interested, hit me up, or hit me up on privately on Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page. At P4P Boxing Report. Let's get things going. Normally, we would have the show will consist of breaking down recapping the week's action, um, news, and then previewing fights for the upcoming week. But I want to switch some things here because of developing an emerging story that has had the boxing world talking a heck of a lot. Uh, September 8th, during the week we were off last during the time that we were off last week, excuse me, on September 8th to be specific, The Athletic reported that Canelo Alvarez in a Los Angeles federal court um, filed a lawsuit against one Oscar De La Hoya, against Golden Boy Promotions and the DAZN streaming service. I wrote about it for Three Kings Boxing. You can check out my work also on threekingsboxing.com. Shout out to the homies. 2K, the head man in charge, Bo, head of media relations, as well as the writing staff, lead writer Bakari, senior writers Jarrell, myself, editor the homie Red. But yeah, I wrote about this for Three Kings Boxing. I saw it. The head of Three Kings 2K, he saw it as well. Like, see if you can get something up, and I just scrambled something up. But yeah, Gail, uh, we've known for a while that Canelo uh, doesn't have the coziest of relationships with either Golden Boy or Oscar, to be specific. And we've heard rumblings behind the scenes. Canelo has intimated that he suggested that he kind of doesn't trust Oscar. Oscar has said in kind in return that when it comes to their relationship, it's strictly business. So you knew that probably something may be rumbling eventually between the two. But did you expect this kind of lawsuit? Canelo suing all parties involved. In the lawsuit, he said that he not only does he wants to fight for a different promoter, he wants to fight for a different streaming service slash network. So he's in the lawsuit itself. He's trying to break away from everyone to be on his own to negotiate with anybody. Doesn't matter if it's PBC, Aram, doesn't matter from him. The bottom line is, Gail, he's not happy with the zone. He's not happy with Golden Boy. He's definitely not happy with one Oscar De La Hoya.
No, he is not. And it doesn't help when you've got grievances to be at home with nothing to do. Although he's been hitting the gym, give Canelo credit. He's a man of discipline. But, you know, a lot of people have a lot more time on their hands right now. And all he's got time to do is just sit there and stew about all the things that have gone wrong in these agreements and these relationships. Now, people do not need to love each other to do business with each other if there's a mutual benefit. But right now, nobody's benefiting. And that's nobody's fault. But it's making what were difficult relationships even more difficult. Now, I will say, with a hat tip to Saul Canelo Alvarez, he has learned his lessons well from one Floyd Mayweather and, funny enough, from one Oscar De La Hoya, both of whom did exactly what he wants to do. They became their own universe, their own promoter. They became free agents. They had the means, the desire, and the wherewithal, and the skills to become their own entity. They didn't need to give a cut to an outside promoter. Oscar did it. Floyd perfected it. You know, and here's one more set of lessons that Canelo has learned from, of all people, Floyd Mayweather. Look how Canelo's career took an upward turn after the loss to Mayweather. But we can now tell he watched every move he made inside the ring and outside the ring and took everything that he could benefit from and learn from. And now he's turning around and putting it to use. So we have this court case, a civil complaint filed in United States federal court in Los Angeles. There is a public document. All that court complaint is the legal version of Canelo's side of the story. Everybody else involved is going to need to answer, but for everyone super crazed, excited about what's going to happen next week, next month, next year even, the legal system grinds slowly at best on the civil side of the house. This is not, no crime's been committed. Nobody's been arrested. Criminal cases get priority. And right now, the courts are barely functional. They've been shut down for months because of the pandemic. Only emergency matters are being heard. So right now, federal court is sitting there with hundreds, if not thousands, of backed up criminal cases where people need justice in a timely manner. People with these civil lawsuits, which are essentially fights about money, you go to the back of the line over there. Wait your turn. We got other stuff to clean up and get caught up on. A case like this wouldn't see a courtroom, probably wouldn't even see depositions for months and months. To me, this is the first noise made in a long discussion, mostly behind the scenes, that's going to go to some kind of mediation or arbitration and a settlement. This is never going to see a courtroom. This is never going to see depositions. And it shouldn't, because they'd be so ugly, every single person would walk away damaged. And every one of the main parties will walk away with really very little relief, because the money will all be going to the lawyers. And nobody wants that either.
Part of the lawsuit had to do with some regarding the issues of opponents, caliber opponents, what's considered a for lack of a better word, big time opponent, A-level opponent, as opposed to kind of B-level, C-level opponents. And boxing Twitter kind of had their say so about that. What do you think about this issue between Canelo and the zone, specifically regarding the caliber of opponents that he's that's supposed to be in part of this the record contract that he signed back in 2018.
Right. So there's a lot of disagreement about definitions, and that is really common in lawsuits where contracts are involved. One party thinks a word means or a term means a certain thing, and another party says, well, my understanding of that's a whole lot different. And you're supposed to talk about these things so that you all understand each other before you get it down on paper. But I will tell you, I have experience having been on a civil jury over a huge amount of money, not this big, but big enough, was $40 million case. I was even the jury foreperson. And we heard evidence for 6 weeks that had to do with misunderstandings by both parties. Interestingly enough, it also involved somebody whose first language wasn't English. So you're relying on other people even more than you would normally rely on lawyers to tell you what certain things mean, what's in there. Canelo was probably in no position, although make no mistake, his English is a lot better, as most people know, than we see on television. He's just more comfortable doing interviews in Spanish. But is his capability up to reading a legal document in English for himself with his own eyes? No, it's not. So he's relying on lawyers to interpret what people are asking of him. On the DAZN side of the house, they don't have a lot of experience in boxing. This is the crux of a lot of the discussion, is the people involved in putting the agreement together on DAZN's side of the house didn't understand the crazy little details of the boxing business. So when they stipulate that a certain number of opponents need to be of the premier category, well, what does that mean? Does it mean that they're rated by certain sanctioning organizations? Does it mean that they hold a title? Does it mean that they're a proven ticket draw or pay-per-view draw? I mean, what is a premier opponent? Is Daniel Jacobs not a premier opponent? I would say he was. Is Sergey Kovalev, even after some not too pretty losses, particularly the one to Eliader Alvarez, which he had avenged, and he was a major belt holder at the time, is that not a premier opponent for sake of argument? If I'm Canelo Alvarez, I would say yes. But apparently that list of premier opponents is a list of one. And we all know who that one is. Gennady Golovkin. Well, DAZN then needs to be very specific about this contract for all this money guarantees that at least one of your 11 fights for us is against Gennady Golovkin. They didn't do that. And now we have a can of worms to unravel. And unfortunately, it seems that what they decided to rely on was some kind of word or assurances from another party that has a contract with Canelo, Golden Boy. But DAZN doesn't have the contract with Golden Boy. Golden Boy has the contract with Canelo. So
Right.
You've got a third party mess and a half they're going to need to deal with. And that was allowed to take place because nobody on DAZN's side of the house really understood these legal and financial arrangements among the three parties. So you have a very messy situation. Canelo wants out. I think in the end, what's going to happen is both sides are going to take their public shots at each other, have their say in public, but they're never going to get into a courtroom in the next few years. Meantime, tick-tock, the clock on Canelo is ticking. He's only got so many years of career left. Their careers are finite. So he can't wait around for that. What's he going to do in the meantime? A judge is definitely going to say to him and all the other parties, listen, go get into mediation, go negotiate settlement, figure out what it's going to take to make things right that everyone can live with, and come back and tell us what it is. That's what's going to happen. So some mediator in the Los Angeles area is going to get a buttload of money to negotiate a settlement. And that $280 million asking price that Canelo filed for him through his lawyers on his behalf, that's the starting figure. So DAZN's going to make some kind of counteroffer, and we'll eventually go back and forth like we're buying a expensive Persian rug in the market in the Middle East, back and forth, back and forth. They'll finally arrive in the middle. And it would really just crack me up if they end up right dead center. They pay Canelo off $140 million and everyone walks away. And then Canelo becomes his own promotional entity. He gets both sides of the deal, and we see who he negotiates to fight from there. And if it's Ilderim, I'll pass out.
I mean, look, on the one hand, DAZN, they're going to need something made because this lawsuit coincided with the news that they had to lay off, what was it, 2-3% of their staff. And there's been rumors for a while that financially they may not be in the best of shape. So they're going to need something done, and I hope not. I hope it's not Ilderim. I mean, I applauded DAZN when the WBC kind of ordered that bout. The WBC DAZN was like, no, we're not taking that fight. That's below our standard. Why have that bout when you're our star? When you're our star, DAZN, one of them, along with Anthony Joshua, right? And they want return on their investment. And given our current dynamics of the sport now with no live gate and whatnot, it didn't make no sense for them to accept that fight. That's one. Two, let's go back to the relationship between Canelo and De La Hoya. I've seen this argument being made on social media when news of this broke. And the question I have for you, Gail, before we move on, what do you say to those who will argue that Canelo is biting off the hand that fed him in terms of Oscar? Oscar invested in him early, made him the star of his stable, made him the cash cow. Look, Canelo Alvarez made the Forbes list last year, either last year or 2 years ago, making somewhere around $90 million a year. The work, it was not only his business acumen behind the scenes, but it was also the due diligence of Oscar that helped Canelo become the sport's current cash cow, the highest paid boxer in the sport. Yet and still, does that mean that Canelo actually does that mean that he has to stay, for lack of a better word, loyal and have this allegiance to him, especially when he really doesn't trust him? So again, for the folks who argue that Oscar's done so much for this guy, how dare Canelo try to sue him now?
It's not as if it was a one-way street. Canelo Alvarez has done a hell of a lot for Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy. But
Right.
too many years ago that in another lawsuit involving Al Heyman, we were privy to quite a few of Golden Boy's financial documents, which showed that the majority of their income for the entire organization rested on the shoulders of one young Canelo Alvarez. So Canelo made Oscar probably far more money than Oscar ever made for Canelo. I'm sure that we could fairly say at this point, they're pretty even. They gave each other mutual benefit for their business. If they walked away at this point, I would argue they're fairly even. It's not Canelo's fault that Golden Boy hasn't been able to develop other cash talents. They're on the brink of it. Of course, the pandemic is hurting businesses of all sorts, including boxing promoters. We would have had probably a big cash draw, cash gate fight with Ryan Garcia in the main event. We would have probably seen a little more action with Virgil Ortiz. Would they have signed any other young, exciting talents? Who knows? A lot of Golden Boy's other everyday, keep the lights on, pay the staff kind of income comes from their club fights. In the fights they were doing, their equivalent of Showbox, the stuff that's out at Fantasy Springs in Indio, California. And they're developing a lot of these young guys. Unfortunately, the timing is such that they're just not quite there. Yes, in the early years, a promoter invests in these talents. They're not getting a massive return right at that moment, but it's like investing in anything. It appreciates. The property, you consider these athletes their property, their product, it appreciates. Canelo has more than returned the investment. I would guarantee it. And Canelo's visibility has drawn some of the other fighters that Golden Boy has been able to sign. The reason that Ryan Garcia, Oscar Valdez, Frank Sanchez are all with Golden Boy, they're all working at the Reynoso's gym, is because of Canelo. So I think they're pretty dead even. I don't think either of those men owe each other particularly anything. But lawyers are going to argue about the language. One or more people in this 3-party lawsuit dropped the ball. So who was it? And I think it's going to be Oscar, unfortunately, because, well, DAZN probably secondarily. I don't think Canelo, because if DAZN had certain expectations of this premier opponent or certain opponents, why wasn't that written out? Was it not written out because they had some kind of sidebar, side deal handshake with Oscar, and he got Canelo pissed at him, and now he can't come through? Well, that's not Canelo's fault. And if they didn't say this straight up to him, and he didn't understand their expectations, well, if it was verbal, that's not on him. If they forgot to put it in the contract explicitly, that's not on him. I think he's going to exit the deal for some walk away. He's going to get the equivalent of step aside money. The truth also is DAZN way overpaid him. Way overpaid him. There was no way in hell a startup streaming service was going to recoup that kind of money, and especially not now. But they wouldn't be the first business to invest in something and realize down the road they aren't going to get their investment back. And if they don't have any other products to pick up the slack, they're in trouble. By the way, this was not the first DAZN layoff. There have been several DAZN layoffs. This was just the latest, most public one. Not a huge surprise. And not a big surprise, given that many other businesses in this country and around the world are hurting too. So it's just crummy timing, and the fans are left, some of them still paying their DAZN fees for what? Chris Mannix's show yelling at Sergio Mora. That's it.
And we will certainly keep you updated on this evolving and developing story. Let's move on to some other news. Again, we're going to do a different format tonight because the Canelo lawsuit was such a big deal last week. It's still being talked about now. I just felt that had to be the first topic of the show. Go to another topic. A couple of weeks back, we talked about Jessica McCaskill, who upset Cecilia Braekhus to win the undisputed welterweight title in Tulsa earlier this month. Last month it was. Anyway, it was up in the air whether Braekhus would call it a day and decide to say she wants no more of the sport. She is 38 years old, has had a long, distinguished career and long, distinguished run as undisputed champion at 147 pounds. Either that or will she exercise the rematch clause that was in the contract? Well, today, Braekhus in a statement, first Eddie Hearn, he tweeted it out. over on Matchroom's Twitter page, and other boxing media, including Three Kings Boxing, wrote about it as well. Braekhus has decided she wants it one more time with McCaskill. A lot of people who watched that fight last month felt that Braekhus deserved the decision. She didn't look the greatest, but they felt that she deserved the verdict. What do you say, Gail, about her deciding that before she probably calls it a day, sooner rather than later, she wants to once again reclaim her throne as undisputed women's welterweight champion?
Well, let me tell you, if I had bet money on whether she was going to retire or come back, I would have lost every dollar. I was pretty convinced, especially based on her remarks after the fight, that she was done. But she was smart. She didn't make any announcement, ironclad at that moment. Yeah, she seemed to be very tired, very homesick, really just done. But clearly she went back home to Norway, settled in and recovered a little bit from a loss, probably talked to her team and her family and thought, I'm not going out like that. I'm just not. Good for her and great for the fans. I think McCaskill was a bit surprised too. She immediately reacted on social media, and I'll look forward to that rematch. It's one little bright note of news in boxing today. Very happy. I was very surprised. How about you, Michael? I was really surprised. Bob, what
I
about
mean, McCaskill and specifically her trainer and manager, they were talking up a potential bout with Katie Taylor. They were, I forgot the show that was on, maybe Mannix, maybe another podcast, that they felt that Braekhus should, in essence, shoot them a solid, sit back in the cut and try to let them, McCaskill, go for a fight against Taylor, a rematch against Taylor, and then shoot for a McCaskill bout. But they conceded that it all depended on whether Braekhus was going to come back, was going to exercise that rematch clause. I felt ultimately Braekhus was, even though she had the look and sounded like a fighter who was just ready to go, didn't want to fight anymore. I had an inkling that she didn't want to go out like that. Um, she probably, in her mind, felt that she won. Um, and that if she's going to call it a day, she's going to call it a day on top. And from a business perspective, it makes sense for all parties involved. Um, Hearn and Matchroom, they can really hype this thing up for later on in the year, and even possibly make this another main event, like the first fight was kind of made a main event as well, but even bigger this time. I wonder where it's going to take place, but I had a suspicion, Gail, that this was going to happen again. Um, I didn't think it would be so soon, but I just had a suspicion that this would happen again. I just didn't think Braekhus was. I just didn't think she wanted to leave the sport on that note.
And bravo to her for letting her competitive nature lead the way. It also tells me that in looking at her options, Taylor or McCaskill, that she thinks she's got a better shot going after McCaskill than she does Taylor. Or she may not want to wait that long to see who wins between McCaskill and Taylor should they have a shootout fight. She probably because of her age just didn't want to sit around waiting, probably didn't want a tune-up fight in the meantime to stay busy, and figured, my best option is just to go for it. Good. The ladies are willing to go after the big fights. They take the rematches. I wish the men would do this. We talk about, unified champions and how rare that is on the men's side. There are 3 on the ladies' side. Alexa Fields, McCaskill, and Taylor. So come on, guys. You got some catching up to do.
Yeah. Indeed, the ladies do it a lot of times. Seem more willing to put it all on the line, unlike the fellas. So the rematch is going to happen. It's just a question of when. Later on this year, early next year. I'm suspecting that later on this year because I can't remember the podcast. It slips in my mind, but McCaskill's manager slash trainer, he was saying that Hearn was chirping in their ear, talking about a rematch between McCaskill and Braekhus as early as November, December. So I'm suspecting the rematch will happen around that time. Um, this wasn't on the original docket that I shared out earlier, but Gail made note of this in a kind of pre-flight show before I hit the button to air things live. Uh, it's regarding a fight happening in a couple of weeks, a card happening in a couple of weeks, featuring the Charlo brothers. Uh, um, Jamal is going to fight Derevyanchenko, defend his middleweight title against Derevyanchenko. Jamel is going to fight uh, um, Rosario, Jetson Rosario, in a unification match at 154 pounds. The issue you was telling me, Gail, before the show is not necessarily the card itself, but the news that surrounding the card, but particularly the uh, how much people are going to have to pay for this fight, which is going to be a pay-per-view show. 74.95 for folks who do not know. Uh, I can understand, Gail, why they kind of put that amount because there's no live gate. PBC wants a kind of a return on their investment. However, if we're really going to be honest here, neither Charlo brothers are quote unquote superstars. I will argue they're not even stars really at this point. Um, are they worthy of that kind of asking price? Um, this is not Canelo here. This is not. This is not Anthony Joshua. This is not Fury. This is not Wilder. Uh, Hell, this is not even Lomachenko here in terms of popularity. Um, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot. And considering our economic times, uh, excessive in my opinion.
It's not Floyd. It's not Jorge Masvidal. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. Even in non-pandemic times, in a non-pandemic, healthy economy, I think you'd have eyebrows raised. But especially right now, people, I do believe most reasonable boxing fans understand the environment we're in and understand with the lack of a gate to get a decent card, you probably going to need to pay a pay-per-view fee. And if it'd been $49.95, $59.95, I even think $10 less, $64.95, I would have pushed it a little bit. I would really like to have seen it come in at $60, especially because you've got essentially two main events with both Maul and Mel both having fights. Everyone would say, that's solid. I'm good with that. I'm fine. $75 though, boy, that's a lot. But let's also think about this. What a lot of people do to justify paying for these big pay-per-views of the past, you went crazy and bought Mayweather, Pacquiao, you blew it on some MMA, big lineups. So what do? So you call all your friends, tell all your family to show up. And by the way, who's bringing the liquor? Who's bringing the food? Who's coughing up $5 a piece to, buy this thing? And everyone rides because everyone shares it. You can't do that right now. You shouldn't be having people come over to your house you don't live with because of the pandemic environment. So there's no way to do that. So all of those factors combined and this big price tag coming back to be the first pay-per-view since Wilder Fury in February. People are just fit to be tied. And boxing Twitter does not hold back. And they let Showtime and the powers that be that made this decision really have it. Showtime had sent out a news release on Friday morning announcing the pricing, and man, they've just ripped it up all weekend. And it wasn't like there was a lot of boxing to talk about. So you know what they were talking about? This big damn ripoff for the Charlo brothers doubleheader. And then this morning, because you can't hold a media workout right now, they did the media workout live on YouTube. And Jamel was in a real salty mood. I'm just gonna say, he was griping about stuff. He snapped at Ray Flores, who was doing the interview afterward. He found out that he was going to have to leave after the workout and go do a COVID test, and he was irritated about that. And you know, this lead in to what is really a very good card, this doubleheader, has just had a few rough spots. Just a few rough spots on the road to September 26th. The truth is, I don't think the price is going to make that much difference in the number of buys. It's kind of a hardcore fans purchase. It's not a casual fans, oh, I think I'm going to watch these guys kind of deal. It just doesn't work that way. So if it gets, a low number of buys, we're going to be hearing a lot of people, engaging in a lot of doom and gloom about the future of boxing, but I don't think we have to worry about it. It's just the circumstances. In closing, I also need to mention what also made it such a bad look, even though the financial circumstances are not comparable, they're not anywhere near the same, but when people can say, wait a minute, Lomachenko and Lopez is free, then you got a problem.
Right, because that's going to, free, through your cable subscriber and whatnot, because that's going to be on.
Yep.
That's going to be on ESPN. This card is going to be a heck of a card, by the way. You're absolutely right. The Charlo brothers fighting in competitive fights. John Rael Casamayor, who after failed negotiations against Inoue, he's going to fight on that card. Luis Nery fighting for a vacant world title, I believe, on that card. Daniel, if he makes weight, Daniel Roman, Mario Barrios is a very good, turning into a contender now to 140 pounds. Brandon Figueroa. So yeah, it's a loaded card for sure, but still, that's a
you have six really solid fights. But again, then we can have the argument that Bob Arum has, pushed forward for decades, which is that no one gives a shit about the undercard. Now the hardcores do, but hardcore folks aren't affected by what other pay-per-views are out there, what the pricing is. The hardcores just, suck it up and do what they need to do. Although I think in this case, you're going to see a lot of illegal streams. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what the numbers are if Showtime even releases what the numbers are. And they may not. I just think it's a lot to ask in this current environment. I not that I think it will make that much difference in the number of buys, but it's just a bad look.
Right. Let's go back to kind of our regular format here and talk about fight recaps and preview in the show by previewing what's happening on the weekend. One fight to really recap that I want to focus. I want to focus on in terms of recap and whatnot, and that is Jamel Herring, which took place. He fought not this past weekend, but the weekend prior. I think the date was the 5th, I believe it was, either the 4th or the 5th. I apologize if I got the dates wrong, but anyway, he fought a guy by the name of Jonathan Oquendo at the Bubble. in Las Vegas. And I want to hit this from two angles here, Gail. Um, Herring ended up winning um, because Oquendo was disqualified, right? He won. He got a knockdown early in the fight. I want to say round three, I believe it was. But from the point after that knockdown, or really overall in the fight, he didn't look great. In what was supposed to be a showcase bout for him, drew heavy criticism from um, the announcement team, particularly Ward and especially Tim Bradley. For those who didn't see the fight, um, in that eighth round, I believe it was, uh, Herring got hit with a headbutt. He had got hit multiple times with headbutts and other stuff from Oquendo, right? And he's was cut. Bradley's point was that he didn't like how Herring reacted once he was cut. And after the fight, yes, Herring's eye was swollen, but he still looked to have his sight. And how can I put this? Forget it. I'm not going to be polite about it. Basically, Tim Bradley and Andre Ward tended to agree. Tim Bradley accused him of quitting. He said he didn't react like a fighter supposed to. Uh, Herring, he took it all in stride and said he's going to learn from experience and admitted he didn't fight, put on his best performance. So let's talk about the fight itself, and particularly what Tim Bradley said about Herring after the fight.
So for those
Do
that
you?
didn't see
Yeah.
the fight, let's set the scene. So Oquendo decided to make it a very ugly fight. He's much shorter than Herring. He's a southpaw. Herring picked him as an opponent on purpose because he essentially provided what Herring thought would be a dress rehearsal for Carl Frampton, similar type of fighter. Instead, Oquendo, who's been in a lot of fights, decided to make it rough and make it ugly. He'd rush at him, head down, right up at him, and clench and not let Herring get at the proper distance to throw. So it was not a fun fight to watch. It was a grind. Herring, was frustrated by it, but Herring landed a dandy uppercut when he did manage to get Oquendo pushed off him, step back and throw. Great punch, decked him, couldn't finish the job off in the third. Unfortunately, Oquendo managed to do what you need to do as a veteran, held on, got out of the round. In another round plus, in the fifth, one of the headbutts finally opened up a cut on Herring. Now, the first cut wasn't too bad. It was kind of high up, but he got cut again. And that was the one that was the bigger problem. That was either the next round or the seventh round. It was right up into the eye. It was bleeding. The first cut got under control pretty well, and Herring had his own cut man with him. And I'm sorry to say, I should know, you should recall the name, but props to him. He kept that under control. The second one was much worse. The fight was just ugly as hell. It was getting harder and harder for Herring to see. And Tony Weeks, the referee, came to the corner after the eighth round and brought the ringside physician over. And the ringside physician was looking at him, and Weeks is looking at Herring and his team saying, "Are you asking to stop the fight?" And Herring didn't want to stop it if it meant that, it would go to Oquendo. So, he's in the middle of the fight. Really, his team, Bomac should have stood up and, discussed what was going to happen. Weeks said, "Listen, are you asking to stop the fight?" But the ringside physician came in and said, "Can you see?" And Herring said, "No, I can't see." So officially, Weeks stopped the fight. But, it's a quiet environment. There's no fans. We can hear what's going on. We can all have a conversation, clear as day. So then, God bless the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Then they had to figure out, so what happens? Well, under the unified rules of boxing,
I said disqualified, but it went to the scorecards. My apologies. I said disqualified, but it went to the scorecards. Yeah, you're right.
No, it did not go to the scorecards. It was a DQ. You are absolutely
okay. You're right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
More than a few minutes to sort out how they were going to deal with it. In the meantime, Herring's sitting there thinking, well, shit, wait a minute. What the hell is taking them so long to decide? Am I in trouble here? But it should have gone to the cards. And had it gone to the cards, two of the scorecards gave Herring every single round of the 8. The third gave Oquendo 1 round. So it was a blowout. It was a blowout in Herring's favor. Instead, it was awarded as a DQ. Now, had the foul that caused the problem in the eye, had the fight been stopped right at the point of the foul, then it's a DQ. But whether or not, this was damaged by attrition, more punches created it. It was too far distant from the original foul to be a DQ. It was simply he was unable to continue per the ringside position and the referee, and it goes to the cards. Nevertheless, Herring took heat, not just from Tim Bradley and Andre Ward, but many, many others, that it was a no moss moment. I'm going to take a different tack, and I will disclose and say right up front, I am friendly with Herring. We've had many Friday night Zoom meetups with Herring. He's chatty. He's part of a big group that kind of hangs around on Friday night because he's bored and he's training. And Herring is the last guy on the planet who would, quote, quit. Herring has had 2 tours of duty in Iraq as a combat Marine, for Pete's sake. And he's gone through what no parent should have to go through, the death of a child, in his arms, by the way. This is not a guy whose fortitude or bravery should be questioned in any way at all. But he's not stupid either. The big payday fight for Herring is Frampton. And he could have bypassed Oquendo entirely because of 2 delays. The original fight was scheduled July 2nd, but he got caught up in negative COVID tests, all kinds of issues. Herring stayed true to his agreement and his word to Oquendo and their team and said, no, we'll do the fight. And he looked at it as a dress rehearsal. Turned out to be not the greatest idea in the world, but put yourself in Herring's shoes. He's gotten cut through no fault of his own. This is a nothing burger fight to him. It means absolutely nothing. It's a blowout. He's winning. There is absolutely no reason for him to fight 4 more rounds of a messy fight that he's completely dominating, to risk more and or permanent damage that might not just take the Frampton fight off the table, it might take his whole career off the table. Because what didn't get reported all that well, unfortunately, is after the fight was over, he's whisked off to one of the major Las Vegas trauma center hospitals to be checked. Precautionary. They decide, we're going to get a look at that. And they were concerned because of the eyesight issue that maybe he'd broken an orbital bone. It didn't particularly look like it, but the eyesight issue apparently concerned the physicians. And, it's not going to hurt anything. The hospital's right up down the street around the corner. It's between the MGM and the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. It's pretty easy. He gets there, and it turns out he didn't break an orbital bone in the fight. He had an old, badly mishealed facial fracture from some previous fight that he didn't even know about. And that was causing the eyesight problem. So can you imagine? He's got a poorly healed fracture in the face that either got dislodged or something happened to where the eyesight issue was worse than the little cut would have made us all think. And let's say that he got headbutted again, or Oquendo hit him a couple of good times, caught him. His career's done, potentially done. He made the right decision, stopping, taking the W, messy as it was, to go forward and fight another day. And that's why ringside physicians are there, and that's why referees are there. So shame on Tim Bradley and shame on Andre Ward. They would have been smart and made the same decision, I would certainly hope, because there was absolutely no point. They would have changed nothing to continue that fight. Every round had gone basically the same for 8 damn rounds. It was a disappointment, and Herring owned up to it being a crummy performance. He owns it. He says, I wasn't at my best. I'm disappointed in myself, but, we'll regroup. You learn from these things and move forward. And that's what needs to happen. So I'm sure we'll all argue about it forever, but there it is.
Yeah, they would be argued about for sure. I would disagree with you about them. Done the same thing. You got to keep in mind what Bradley put himself through against Provodnikov. He fought stupid and stayed fighting stupid until the end, and his career damn near ended from that. And I would argue he never really recovered from that fight. So
he said very honestly, quite a few months after the fact, that he was concussed in the second round of the fight with Provodnikov in 2013, and while he appeared to physically recover, he had some major PTSD type issues. He had some major depression issues and some trauma. He was very messed up for a long time. Anyone will tell you a concussion that doesn't otherwise cause, breakage or damage, it's often 8, 9, 10, 12 months before you're quite right again. And he talks about being in a very, very dark place after that. So, you would think of all people, Tim Bradley would have some understanding about, cutting your losses and, keeping your health and your career intact when there's honestly was no point in fighting 4 more rounds. Just none. It wasn't going to change the outcome of the fight unless Oquendo stopped Herring. That was the only option, and that wasn't going to happen. I'm sorry. Not in anyone's normal universe.
Here's the other side of that. After the fight, days after the fight, over the weekend, news broke that Herring, who was with Arum and Team Bud Crawford and all those folks, Bomac and all that crowd, news broke that Herring has signed a deal with MTK Global. Your reaction to that, to the move, why do you think he did it? Was it a case of him, they just presented him with a deal that he couldn't refuse, and what does it mean for this proposed bout against Carl Frampton that was supposed to happen late this year, early next year?
Well, given the injuries to Herring, we were thinking we'd get this fight before the end of the year. I certainly think that's in doubt, looking at the calendar and looking at the nature of the injuries. Cuts only heal so fast. It was going to be probably 3 months before he could get back in the gym in a serious way. Clearly there's some benefit to him managerially. We don't know what the offers are beyond Frampton, potentially. And, they all have to be a bit speculative because stuff can happen to potential opponents, with so many months. Herring has made very little secret of the fact that he doesn't want to fight forever. He's got other ambitions in life. He's a very accomplished guy. He has a life outside of boxing, thank God. And I get the impression he only wants to fight a handful more times and he's good. He's 32 years old. He's a little older than his record would indicate. I'm betting it's the deal that gets him to say 35 or so, and he's done. And the other thing is, we forget Frampton or Herring's in one of the smaller weight classes where these guys just age faster. I forget that he fights bigger than he is. He's not a big guy. He's 5'6". So I think that he's laying the groundwork toward his exit date, and they must have offered him a smart path with some decent fights to that end.
Do you think the Frampton fight happens still?
I think it happens still. I don't think it happens this year.
Let's move on. Go ahead.
Figure out, does he sit on the shelf and wait, or does he take another fight? So we'll see.
Indeed. Let's move on to start to close the show by talking about some fights that's going to happen this weekend. It's a card on ESPN Plus. Headlined by Jose Pedraza in the junior welterweight division. Pedraza looked very good his last time out. I think it was a stoppage when he had, returning back to the ring to fight Javier Molina. Your thoughts on this fight, Gail, and how, given how Pedraza looked in his last fight, how far off do you think he's before he gets back in the world title picture?
He needs a good performance this weekend. It's a crossroads fight, both for him and Javier Molina. Molina is one of those 2008 Olympians who's he's just sort of limped along. He had a lot of promise. He was a rising star, blasting his way up. He had some out of the ring issues. He had some injury issues. He finally has sort of got back into the scheme of things. And the pandemic hits. He had a very good win over against Amir Imam. Right before the pandemic shut everything down. So he's getting a decent shot here against Pedraza. Pedraza's last fight, it was also a delayed fight due to COVID issue. Or I take that back. It wasn't delayed. He was also in that first blast of guys getting in after pandemic against Michael Lapierre, and he won. He was expected to win. It wasn't a pretty win. Was it a rust issue? Was it the issues of being one of those first pioneers of the bubble? Admittedly, they were still feeling their way through everything. Hard to say. Both these guys are destined for journeyman status if they don't win this weekend. So for what appears to be a minor fight, the stakes for the guys involved are pretty high.
All right. This fight is going to happen on the 19th at the Bubble in Las Vegas. Along as part of that card, you're also going to have the top-ranked debut of Efe Ajagba. Ajagba, I believe, was with PBC previously. If looks count for anything, Ajagba certainly has the look of someone who has real potential in the heavyweight division. Problem is he hasn't really fought anybody. He's more known for stepping in there with a guy who decided to walk out before the bell even rung.
One of the most fun moments ever in boxing.
Right. He said no mas before the opening bell. So he hasn't been really been tested, and he's fighting a guy by the name of Johnny Rice. And based on what I've seen of Mr. Rice, probably no relation to Jerry Rice. He looks like he may be a guy who, related to Bob Hope, Mr. No Hope.
Oh.
I don't see this guy giving Ajagba that much of a battle.
Well, I noticed that Mr. Rice is a native of Columbia, South Carolina. That was very
I didn't know that.
Yes.
That I didn't know. So he's from my home state.
Yes, he is. Now a resident of Los Angeles, 33 years old. He's a tall dude. He's one of the tall, modern heavyweights. He's 6'5". I would imagine that's the reason he was chosen as an opponent. Also, they're not really bringing in a ton of opponents from outside, Southern California and Southern Nevada into the bubble. This is to introduce the big power punching machine that is Efe Ajagba. And it's fun to watch. But if we recall his last fight, it was an absolute crazy, crazy fight against one Iago. Well, I take it back. Take it back. Has he had one fight since then? He has had one fight since this. In March, he was on an undercard of the Barclays Center. It was a quick TKO and fairly forgettable. But before that, last December, he had, again, one of the wildest heavyweight fights I've ever sat in against Turkish opponent Iago Kiladze, and that was on the Charlo Harrison rematch undercard. And nobody knew who Kiladze was. He's from Soviet Georgia, actually. And he was there to get hit, but he also put Ajagba.
That's right. He did put him down. That's right.
Both these guys are big dudes. They were wobbling and crashing all over the ring
I forgot about that fight. You're right.
End of the fight, the crowd was on its feet cheering for Kiladze, this improbable opponent that was standing up to Ajagba, and he just kept getting rocked by shots, but then managed to turn around as it looked like he was going down and take Ajagba down. Hopefully he learned from that guys in the heavyweight division with punching power, I don't care how much they're wobbling, you got to watch yourself. So this is meant to be a showcase fight. Ajagba is 13-0 with 11 knockouts, and he's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but he is 26 years old. And I've seen him stall a little bit. He had a really, really good fight a year and a half ago against Amir Mansour, who gave him a great fight until Mansour got injured, unfortunately, and had to retire. Since then, they've been, kind of the expected fights. He was on the Pacquiao-Thurman undercard and had a rough fight. Won by decision, but that was also supposed to be a blowout. So I need to see Ajagba deliver on the promise of his potential sooner than later. He looks like he's got all the goods. He's super menacing. He's physically impressive. He's got the punching power, but he's got to start putting some of those other skills together behind it.
There are other fights that we can talk about. Robeisy Ramirez, the Cuban, and other fighters. But I think I'm going to hold off on that and try to recap those bouts next week, because we're a little bit on time here. So I want to move. That card is taking place again on the 19th at the Bubble on ESPN Plus. Same night on Showtime. You got a card headlined by Erickson, Lubin, and an eliminator against Terrell, Gausha. Lubin, a lot of people still got that Jamal fight against Lubin. Jamel fight against Lubin, where Lubin got caught with one shot, basically put him down and out. Lubin, to me, is a really, really talented fighter who's still trying to etch that memory out of the minds of many boxing people. Gausha, he's solid, and I think he'll give Lubin a good fight. If Lubin is good as I think he is, Gail, and if he's fully recovered, not just physically but mentally from that fight against Charlo, I believe he will win, and I think he will win. I don't know if he'll knock him out, but I think he'll win rather comfortably here. Your thoughts?
I agree. He should. He needs to. He needs to have a flashy win to put himself back right in the middle of the conversation. It's such a good division. These guys have all tangled with each other, and there's still a lot of matchups to be made to determine who the top man is. And I'd like to see Lubin in that mix. Back when he first hit the scene, we had he and Jared Hurd sort of emerge at the same time. And when I picked prospect of the year, it's truly a coin toss for a lot of people. Was it going to be Hurd? Was it going to be Lubin? My coin turned up for Lubin. So I've been a little bit disappointed since then. Is not at the same level, but like a Jogba, he needs to deliver and soon. And now's a good time, Erickson, for you to deliver. And he has more skills than Terrell Gausha, Gausha is solid, but not impressive. So I see it for Lubin like you do.
On the undercard of that, you got a Mongolian fighter by the name of Tugstsogt Nyambayar. I'm not going to try to pronounce his whole name because I will butcher it. Nyambayar fought Gary Russell Jr. last year. Even though he lost to Gale, I thought he gave a good account of himself. Nyambayar was number one contender for Russell's WBC 126-pound title at the time that they fought. He returns to the ring to fight Eduardo Ramirez in another kind of WBC eliminator. See, Russell, that's what you get when you only fight once a year. You get these things happening to you. Your thoughts on this? I think personally, this is a solid matchup. I have Tugstsogt Nyambayar. I'm leaning his way, but again, just like Erickson Lubin, I think that Gausha can give and will give Lubin a pretty tough scrap, but I think he'll be on the losing end. Same thing here. I think Ramirez will give Tug a King Tug a good scrap here. I just think he's going to come up a little bit short.
I'm not sure. Is Ramirez still his opponent, or is?
I could be wrong.
I think he has been replaced by a fighter from the general Washington, D.C. area who's a native of Barbados named Colby Abreu, who's undefeated. Now, that doesn't mean he has a record worth a damn, and certainly his opponent resume is very unimpressive. But, we have an unknown coming in. I do think Nyambayar, he did impress against Russell. It's hard to look impressive against Russell. He didn't win, but it wasn't a blowout. He acquitted himself well. He handled the speed pretty darn well. He joins a long list of guys who've come up short against Russell, but he didn't embarrass himself at all. And it wouldn't have taken much for the fight to go the other way. So what I'm interested in seeing is how much of a learning experience was it? How does he look now after having fought Russell Jr.? Did it point out what he needed to work on? Did it teach him a few things? Sometimes after a loss like that, a guy comes roaring back. And I hope that's what we see.
Yeah, you're right. He's fighting a guy by the name of Colby Abreu, 15-0, 5 knockouts. Problem is, I'm looking at his resume.
Dog meat. It's just bad.
Right.
So there aren't even any tomato cans or taxi drivers on there. It's dog walkers. This is bad.
Final fight we're going to talk about here is we've talked about this guy a lot of times here on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Jaron Boots Ennis. If Virgil Ortiz is not the top welterweight prospect or the top overall prospect in boxing, Boots may be that guy. I like how he fights a lot. I think he's super talented. The Philadelphia prospect, only 23 years old. Good height for the division, 5'10", 5'11". Fights mainly as a southpaw, but he can go righty as well. Really dynamic in what he brings to the table. He fights arguably the toughest opponent of his career on paper. Um, Juan Carlos Abreu. Um, Abreu, he's had a decent career. He fought. He lost to uh, Kavaliauskas, who fought over the weekend. I should have quick word on that fight, Gail. I forgot to mention that Kavaliauskas, his win over the weekend. I didn't see it. Your thoughts on that, Gail?
So that was the lead fight for this last weekend, which, by the way, everybody, if it escaped your attention, it was Mexican Independence Day weekend without a single notable Mexican fighter to be seen. The most notable, one of the only Mexican fighters in action anywhere in the world last weekend, was Joet Gonzalez, who'd been delivered a beatdown by Shakur Stevenson in his last fight. And Shakur was, dating his sister, and that was a big damn drama. So we had Joet deliver a pretty good thrashing to Miguel Mariaga. Not quite the embarrassment that Lomachenko delivered to Mariaga, but it was a very solid outing, really a good one for Gonzalez. The main event was Adigis Kavaliauskas, who is generally called Mean Machine because of his name. He's a native of Lithuania. And he was put up in a very interesting fight, and gosh, it's slipping my mind who his opponent was. Michael Zuski. Michael
Right.
Zuski is a serviceable French Canadian from Quebec opponent who was undefeated with one of those very Swiss cheese type resumes. The only wins of any merit on his resume were 2 Mexican journeymen. So it was not particularly a pretty fight. It was a grinded out, not a lot to recommend it fight for 8 rounds until Kavaliauskas finally got proper distance and delivered just a vicious left hook. He followed it up with enough combination punching to take him down right at the end of, I believe, the 8th round. Zuski beat the count, but only because the knockdown was delivered at the 10-second warning. He made it out of the round. He came out for the next round, and we didn't get to see if he'd recovered, was still wobbly or what. There at the center of the ring, Kavaliauskas stepped forward, nailed him again, and the fight was over. So he had a great performance for about that last 30 seconds of the fight, separated by a minute. Prior to that, it was, okay. What was more interesting was when they asked him, okay, what do you want to do now? We've got this difficulty in the welterweight division where, all of the key players are across the aisle with another promoter. So Kavaliauskas, whose last fight was fairly close until he got stopped, lost to Terrence Crawford, says, how about a rematch with Crawford? And as everybody's saying, excuse me? Huh? What? He says, think about it. They don't have any fights for him. All the other guys are over there. He's right. And he said, why not? What else has he got going on? I'm here. I'm up for it. Let's do it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, hell, why not? Why not? I mean, really, Bud doesn't have a lot of options. He's been talking about a fight with Kell Brook. I just cannot get excited about that whatsoever. So given the choice of, do I want to see him fight Kell Brook? No, I do not. Kell Brook needs to retire. Or do I want to see a rematch? I really wouldn't mind seeing a rematch. If you'd asked me that before the fight this weekend, I probably wouldn't go there. But Kavaliauskas had a decent performance. The knockouts were knocked down, and then the follow-up feel it knockout were very impressive. He admits he made mistakes in the Crawford fight. He said his main mistake was he was doing so well about midway through the fight, he just lost focus. That's a pretty honest assessment. And now I'm really intrigued by this. So keep an eye on that. Don't be too shocked if you see a Crawford Mean Machine rematch. Go figure.
Quick word before we go back to the Boots in his fights against Abreu. One, from Mean Machine's perspective, I can see why he will want a rematch with Bud, given how that first fight with Ann. I don't care what Bud Crawford says or his camp. He got hurt in that fight, and I thought that should have been a knockdown.
Yes,
I think it was around 3 or whatever. That being said, I don't want to see a rematch. I don't want to see a rematch with him. I don't want to see a fight with Kell Brook. No. He may not have any options, but if I'm Bud, if I'm Aram, if I'm Bomac, throw him in there against Ugas. Ugas is a guy. He's a known guy. He's a tough guy.
yeah.
Boxing fans, they had forgot about his fight against Porter, which could have went either way according to some. And they can get him for cheap. It would be a solid name on the resume. Make that happen. Folks don't want to see
You
Kell
got
Brook.
promotional issues again. So, a lot of the top welterweights are just locked up over on the PBC side of the aisle. And yeah, you think they'd toss Ugas in because you're right, you're not losing a lot of money by doing that. But is it how frosty is the relationship between the two promoters?
They'll throw him that bone. They'll throw Ugas that bone.
I,
Uh,
I agree with
will
you.
they do it for Thurman right now? No. Will they do it
No,
for Spence right now? Absolutely not. Will they do it for Pacquiao right now?
yeah,
I
the big four are untouchable. Pacquiao, Thurman, Spence, and Porter not touchable. The rest of them,
right.
let me just say this. If the only options are between Brook and Kavaliauskas, I'll take Kavaliauskas over Brook all day long. If Ugas is a choice, yes, that's the smarter fight to make. If Crawford beats him, which he should, and Mean Machine's still hanging around and Crawford still has no other options or offers, he can get in line. And I truly, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it.
Okay, let's get back to this fight with Boots and Abreu. Abreu, who lost to who lost to Mean Machine.
Yes, he did.
Just based, he's lost to Mean Machine. He lost to Alex Besputin. I think he lost to Jamal James as well.
Yes, he did. That was
And
that was not a beatdown though,
right,
because he knocked James down. James returned the favor, and it went to the cards, and the cards were fairly close.
right. The problem is Abreu was 33, and I think that because of the youth and just the sheer talent of Boots Ennis, I think he will win. I think he will win in fairly impressive manner. If he knocks him out, would be even more impressive. Your thoughts, Gil?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A knockout would really be a terrific statement. Abreu's never been stopped, so that would be a nice notch on Ennis's resume. And this fight for him, for Ennis with Abreu, reminds me a little bit of the fight Virgil Ortiz had with Mauricio Herrera. A tough guy, kind of expected to win the fight. How do they do it? Virgil Ortiz Jr. stopped Herrera for the first time in Herrera's career. Wouldn't it be super if Ennis does the same with Abreu? It would really be a similar step-up type, prove themselves situation. I think that is what we're going to see. I think that he'll be very eager to make that happen. That's a really good step-up performance that would benefit him right now, especially in that welterweight division. These guys need to start making statements. He's part of this next generation coming up right behind the big four plus Crawford. So time for him to make some noise.
Indeed, yeah. He's ready. It's time for Boots to make the next step up in his career. You see in Virgil Ortiz, kind of his contemporary, budding rival at welterweight. doing it right now. So
Now,
yeah,
I will
he
say,
needs to make that move.
however, as part of it, as a card carrying member of the boxing fashion police, I want to see what he's going to come in the ring wearing because, oh my God, he has worn some crazy, crazy ring costumes in the past. So,
I mean, yeah, he brings it back to
oh my
the
God,
days of the late Hector Camacho with the frills and
he does.
and all the other stuff. So
That kid likes him some neon.
and the tassels and all the other stuff.
I
So
mean,
yeah,
he missed the 80s apparently and thought, no, I want a piece of that. So, so we'll see what it's always good fun when he comes into the ring dressed in some of that crazy stuff and certainly doesn't affect his performance. So son, have at it.
nah, it doesn't slow down his hand speed or take away from his power. So if he likes it, I love it. I'll let him do himself. Do you?
Right.
And I think we're going to start to shut things down on that note. Unfortunately, Daniel from the Inscriber, he couldn't make it. You can check out his stuff, his show with Francis and Joe from Four Boxing News on SoundCloud, Inscriber Boxing, where they talk the sweet science and where they talk the Miami Heat. If you want to talk boxing, if you want to talk the NBA, the Miami, who are in the Eastern Conference Finals right now, you can check him out on Twitter at Rawkus99, RAWKUS99. Going to you, Gail, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk media, because you do. You are in public relations. You do teach media on the side. Let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me
And where they can find you on where they can find you because you are basically a regular now on TMZ.
I'll tell ya, Harvey Charles, yeah, bring me on Tuesday Live every so often. My last commentary was about Dr. Dre's wife, Nicole, asking for an outrageous spousal support. He wants $2 million, by the way, including $20,000 a month for her phones. What the hell? $20,000 a month for your phones? What does she have? Satellite phones? What the hell is that? Anyway, I digress. You can find me in my regular column on boxing, the news that really matters, at Communities Digital News, which is COMM Digi News, comdiginews.com. And it's time for Dancing with the Stars to return. Oh my God, that's my guilty pleasure. No boxers performing this time. We got us a Tiger King participant, a bachelorette, retired athletes, the usual drill. But hey, any port in a storm.
Indeed. As I said at the beginning of the show, for those who want to talk boxing, well, I hadn't said at the beginning of the show, but I'll say it now. Excuse me. For those who want to talk boxing with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JRSC. You can also check me out, Pound Pound Box Report Twitter page. That's at P4P, the number P, the letter P, the number 4, the letter P, Boxing Report. Also on Twitter, as I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to find out all information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to for now, P4P Boxing Report, .wordpress.com. If you're checking us live on YouTube, you just hit that description below and you'll find out all the information, where to follow us all over social media, where to check out all the podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and whatever. Also, you can check out where you can donate to the show. Got a Cash Me and PayPal donation link. And check out my online coaching page. I am an online coach with Beachbody.com. Again, if you're interested in getting your fitness game up, if you're interested in taking your fitness to another level, or if you're trying to get into some shape, quarantine workout, whatever. A lot of people still having to work home because of COVID-19 pandemic. Just please check out my coaching page on Beachbody.com, on Beachbody On Demand. There are 2-week trials, free trials that run concurrent throughout the year. So if you want to check out what's on there for 2 weeks for free, just check out my online coaching page on Pound for Pound Box Report blog page, or just hit me up privately on Twitter, Brother JR76, or Pound for Pound Box Report Twitter page. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the Boots Ennis fights with boost Ennis fights against Abreu. King Tug Nyambayar and Ramirez, Erickson, Lubin, and Gausha. We would also do a recap of the fights on the 18th with Pedraza and effing Ajaba, and we will do a preview of the fights on the 26th, which we talked about earlier in the show. The Charlo brothers, they're going to fight. Jamel is going to defend his middleweight belt against Sergey Deverenchenko. I think Deverenchenko is going to give Jamel a heck of a fight. On the undercard of that, Jamal's twin brother Jamel, he's going to be fighting a unification bout with Jason Rosario. WBC, WBA, IBF 154-pound world titles are on the line. Also on that card, Brandon Figueroa is going to fight John Rael Casamayor, going to defend his WBO 118-pound title. Luis Nery is going to fight for a belt at 122. Former unified 122-pound champ Daniel Roman is going to fight Juan Carlos Payano. So really, really loaded card. On the 26th, we're going to preview those fights. Also on the 26th, in Munich, Germany, the finals of the Dortico is going to fight Bradis, I think in the cruiserweight unification bout, and also on the 26th, Joshua Taylor is going to make his mandatory defense of the IBF WBA 140-pound title. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, Gail. If you want to take a shot at it, go ahead.
Oh gosh, let me call this sucker up because I gotta. If I don't see it, I won't be able to do it. Josh, by the way, Josh Taylor. Yeah, he's a Thai opponent. Apanoon Kong Song. Apanoon Kong Song. Not too tough, if that's his real name. And it may be that we have lost our host. So I'm going to close out on behalf of Michael, on behalf of our absent colleagues, Daniel Carpio from the Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, who we hope to have return. I am your substitute host for just these few seconds, Gail Falkenthal. Thank you for listening. Good night.
want to make a quick apologies. My bad on that. I see Gail has gone. Um, yeah, I just had a major computer malfunction, some major technical issues on my end. Um, yeah, I just want to say, yeah, we will talk about all those fights. The King Tug fight, we'll preview the fights on September 25th with the big monster card there with the Charlo brothers and whatnot. Again, I want to apologize for that sudden ending of the shows, the major technical issues on my end. I had to start things back up. But yeah, this has been episode 298 of Pound for Pound Box Report. I am your host, Michael. We'll see you guys next time. Again, my sincere apologies for what just happened on the technical side on my end. Computer just went haywire on me. Yeah, episode 298, Pound for Pound Box Report. See you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.